I'm Dr. Daniel Amen. I am so excited to be with you. Brain Thrive by 25. If you stay with us, this course will make a huge positive difference for the rest of your life. And I'm not kidding. This course has actually been in 7 countries and 42 states and has changed the lives of literally tens of thousands of young people. And one of the reasons we developed it is because your brain is still developing. Your brain doesn't finish developing until you're 25 in females and sort of like 28 in males. I am a physician, also a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I've written a lot, best-selling books and national television shows, but I am more passionate about teaching you because I know if you start your life with really good brain habits, it will make a positive difference for the rest of your life. And the reason that is, brains run the world. Brains run the stock market, the local market. Brains run huge corporations, mom and pop shops down the street. Brains run governments, schools. This is actually where our program is taught, the Fraser Academy in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. It was so much fun to see them get excited about their brains. Brains run churches. This is one of the largest churches in the world, Saddleback Church, and my friend Pastor Rick Warren, where we have planted brain health in that church. Brains run families. These are my 2 grandbabies, Eli on the left and Liam on the right. And I'm so excited to help their brains develop, like I'm excited to help yours. And brains run you, everything you do. Yet most people rarely think about their brains, especially when they're young, which is a huge mistake because success in anything you do always starts with a better brain, with one that is optimized. Here at Amen Clinics, where I'm recording this, we do brain imaging. And through the course, I will teach you a lot about the brain imaging work we do because it just illustrates so many important points. And we've been doing it virtually every day for the last 25 years. We've built the world's largest database of brain scans related to behavior, so more than 125,000 scans on people from literally all over the world, from 111 countries. And after looking at all these scans, it's very clear to me that when your brain works right, you work right. On the screen, you see 2 SPECT scans. So SPECT is the study we do at Amen Clinics, and SPECT looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how your brain works. And we're looking underneath the brain, and the image on the left shows full, even, symmetrical activity. The image on the right is of an alcoholic, and you can see the overall severe low activity. So the holes doesn't mean he has holes in his brain. What that means is they're global, so everywhere, global decreases in brain activity. And this is one of the most important things we have learned. When your brain works right, you work right. But when your brain is troubled, for whatever reason, you had a head injury, you drank too much, you decided to start smoking pot or do cocaine or methamphetamines or morphine, OxyContin, Xanax, all of those things can damage your brain. When your brain is troubled, you are much more likely to have trouble in your life. With a healthy brain, what we've seen, seeing literally tens of thousands of people at Amen Clinics over the last 25 years, when your brain is healthy, you're happier. You're physically healthier. Why? Because you make better decisions. You're wealthier. Why? You make better decisions, and you're more successful in everything you do. In your relationships at home, in your relationships at school, in how you perform in school, in how you perform at work. All of those are brain functions. When your brain is not healthy, for whatever reason, people tend to be sadder, sicker, poorer, and less successful. Your competitive advantage or disadvantage in your life actually comes down to the actual physical functioning of your brain. So here is that same SPECT scan, the healthy one, where you're looking at different views. So top left, we're looking underneath the brain like we saw before. Bottom right, we're looking down from the top. The other views look at it from the side. And what we're looking at in a healthy scan is full, even, symmetrical activity. So symmetrical just means the sides look like each other. The color doesn't matter, it's the shape we're looking at. Now compare it to one of our NFL players. So here at Amen Clinics, we actually did the first and largest brain imaging study on active and retired NFL players. And what we saw was high levels of damage in our players. So overall low activity, especially in the front part of the brain. You're going to learn all about your frontal lobes. They're involved with things like forethought and judgment, impulse control. And in the temporal lobe, so if we look at the top left one, about halfway down, you can see they're really low in activity. And your temporal lobes are very important because they're involved with memory and learning. So here is a scan of one of the drug addicts that I treated. When I first started doing imaging in 1991, so before most of you were born, I was the director of a dual diagnosis unit. It's a psychiatric hospital unit that takes care of drug addicts. And the scans just looked awful when we compared them against healthy scans. So again, the holes don't mean dead tissue. What they mean is globally, everywhere, low activity in the brain. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to talk about some brain basics. What are some basic facts about your brain that you want to know? It's so simple, but so important. And the first fact is your brain is involved in everything you do and everything you are. So this is actually a great picture of me and Muhammad Ali. He was, probably the greatest boxer of all time. And do you think boxing is good for your brain or bad for your brain? Really bad for your brain. Your brain's involved in everything you do. How you think, how you feel, how you act, how well you get along with other people. Your brain is the organ of intelligence, character, and every single decision that you make. Your brain is involved with all of these functions. It dreams, it thinks, it helps to direct your body. It helps you make good health decisions or bad ones. That's where memories are stored in your brain. It's the organ of your personality. It solves problems effectively or not effectively, so it's intimately involved in your success. It makes decisions for you. It decides what you eat, how you feel, your mood, your relationships, how much energy you have, your level of spirituality, creativity. It's involved in anxiety, even controls your heartbeat and how you move. Your brain is involved in helping you get a date and how you do on that date. your brain is involved in whether or not you get a job, and if you do, how effective you are at the job. Your brain is involved in how you do in school, which college you get into. Your brain is involved in absolutely everything you do. Fact number 2, your brain is ridiculously complex. It is the most complicated organ that we're aware of in the universe. It has 100 billion nerve cells and trillions of supportive cells. It actually has more connections than there are stars in the universe. And even though your brain is only 2% of your body's weight, it uses 20 to 30% of the calories that you consume. It uses 20% of the oxygen and blood flow in your body, even though it's only 2% of your body's weight. Information in your brain travels up to 268 miles an hour, so sort of like one of the NASCAR speedways. If you take a piece of brain tissue the size of a grain of sand, it has 100,000 neurons in it, or brain cells, and 1 billion connections all talking to one another. It has the storage capacity of 6 million years of the Wall Street Journal. Males have about 10% more brain cells or neurons, but females actually have more connections. I was on a radio show once, and there was a woman host to the radio show, and she said, "Tell me, Dr. Amen, why do men need 10% more cells to get the same amount of things done that we can do?" And it's because females have more connections, and they're both critically important. Brain fact 3. This is very important for you to know. In fact, this is one of the reasons I decided I had to do this course with Dr. Payne. Your brain is not fully developed until about the age of 25 in females and up to 28 in males. This is critically important, and we'll talk about it through the course, that your brain at 12, at 15, at 18, at 22 is still undergoing wild development. It is critical that you take care of your brain. So when we think of brain development, 18 might be the age where you are legally an adult, where you can join the military, for example, but your brain is definitely not finished developing. I remember when I was 18, and it was a long time ago, Vietnam was still going on, and the government had a draft, and so I signed up for the draft because I had to, and one of the recruiters said, "Well, here are all these interesting jobs." And so I was thinking about, maybe joining the Army, and I went home and my dad said, "There's a war going on. Why would you join?" And I told him, "I'm 18. I can do whatever I want." And 3 weeks later, I had my head shaved, and I'm at basic training with these people yelling at me, calling me a maggot. And I'm thinking, how did I get here? So just because you're 18 doesn't mean you're an adult. Certainly in my case, it wasn't true. Everything young people do helps or hurts the brain's development. Everything you do is either helping your brain grow and develop, or it's hurting it. And if it hurts your development, it's actually hurting your long-term potential and your success. Things like early brain injuries, drug use, alcohol use, smoking, poor nutrition are a disaster for brain development. So, like if you had a plant, if you poured poison into the plant, that it wouldn't develop properly. The same thing happens in your brain, which is why you want to avoid anything that hurts it and do things that help it. Brain fact number 4, your brain is quite fragile. In fact, most people don't know this, but your brain is very soft, and it's housed in a really hard skull that has multiple sharp, bony ridges. So most people sort of think of the brain as firm, fixed, and rubbery, but that's what happens to it when you die, and then they put it in formaldehyde, which is a fixing solution. But inside your human skull, it is literally like soft butter, tofu, custard, somewhere between egg whites and Jell-O. And if you look at the inside of a skull, it is got multiple sharp, bony ridges. So if you think of taking this soft, butter-like brain that controls everything you do and everything you are, and start slamming it up against soccer balls, against helmets, playing football, having concussions in equestrian sports, horseback riding, you can see it can damage your life. So it is critical to understand your brain is involved in everything you do. When it works right, you work right, and when it doesn't, there's trouble. Your brain is complicated and it's soft, the consistency of soft butter. It's housed in a really hard skull, and brain injuries, they matter. This is really important stuff on why you should do everything you can to protect your brain. Because when you protect your brain, you're actually protecting the future, your future ability to be a good dad, to be a good mom, to be an effective employee or an effective employer. Everything in your life stems from the actual physical functioning of your brain. There's a character in history in this book about Phineas Gage, which is really important for you to understand about how important your brain is. So Phineas Gage was a railroad construction worker in 1848, and he worked for a company called the Burlington and Rutland Railroad, and they're laying railroad tracks in Vermont, and his job was in explosions. And what he would do is when there was rock, he would explode the rock out so they could clean it up and lay the railroad tracks. And he was described as a moral man of good character, and he would use this long 3.5-foot tamping iron. So what he would do is he'd put gunpowder in the hole near the rock, a fuse on top of the gunpowder, and then sand on top of the gunpowder and fuse. And then he'd use this long iron rod and tamp it down. And then he'd light the fuse and run like heck, and there'd be an explosion to explode out the rock. Well, one day he had the tamping iron between his knees, and as he was putting gunpowder into the hole in the rock, he accidentally dropped the iron rod. As it dropped, it hit the rock, caused a spark, which exploded the gunpowder, and this iron rod went underneath his left cheek, behind his left eye, actually took out the left front side of his brain, and it landed about 30 feet away, and he didn't lose consciousness. It's a very important point. With blood coming down his face, he looked to his friend and said, did you see that? And they looked to another friend and said, well, did you see that? And he started to walk to town, Cavendish, Vermont, to see his doctor. And they put him in a wheelbarrow and wheeled him to town. And 6 months after the accident, so he lived, and 6 months after the accident, he went back to work. But Phineas Gage, at the moment of that accident, was no longer Phineas Gage. That's what his doctor, John Harlow, had said about him, because when he went back to work, he was a moral man of good character. And now when he went back to work, he had trouble being on time. He had lots of ideas but couldn't follow through on them. He would swear really awful, so they wouldn't let him be around females. So he didn't last very long in that job. And then he went to South America, where he drove a stagecoach. And then he went to New York, where he's actually part of P.T. Barnum's circus. He was a circus freak. He'd go around, show people his iron rod and what happened to him. And then he ended up moving to California and died 11 years later. But you can see how that one injury changed the trajectory of his life. And it's just so important for you to love your brain and protect it. The brain takes time to develop. Newton's first law of motion states that an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by a force. So what does that mean? So if you're going 30 miles an hour in your car, but you're texting, and all of a sudden you get into an accident, so your brain is going 30 miles an hour, and then boom, it stops. But inside your skull, it just doesn't stop. It bounces front, back, and that's where the damage can often occur. When your head is in motion, then stops. Your soft brain hits against your hard skull with sharp, bony ridges and causes injuries. Blood vessels can break, neurons can tear. Over time, scar tissue develops. Protect your brain. Now think, and in the lab, you might even talk about, well, what are all the ways people can harm their brains? I'll give you some examples, but I'm sure you have more. Cheerleading. For people who are flyers in cheerleading, they could get dropped on their head. In lacrosse, you might get hit in the head. Horse racing, what killed Superman? Christopher Reeves, one of the most famous Supermans, he broke his neck in a horseback riding accident. Water polo, where the ball hits you in the head or somebody's elbow hits you in the head. Headers in soccer, but it's not just headers. You can get kicked in the head, or heads hit each other. Or you might lose your feet from under you and your head hits the ground, or your head hits the goalpost. Football is just so many ways. And the point of football is really trauma, because the goal is to get you down. Hockey, from being hit in the head with a stick or fist, or helmets hitting each other. Baseball, you can get hit in the head with the bat or the ball. Basketball, actually a fair amount of injuries with basketball, elbows and falling and things along those lines. Here's a 15-year-old soccer player who I saw who had 3 concussions, and the arrows are pointing to areas of damage in this person's brain, and he had to actually take a whole semester off of school. Here's a 12-year NFL player, and he's actually a very funny story, because I asked him how many concussions he had, and he said none. He didn't have any concussions, but his brain looks awful. Why? Because he had thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of subconcussive blows, which means he got hit in the head, but he didn't notice anything, but clearly it wasn't good for him. Here's a jockey that we've seen who fell off his horse on multiple occasions. And here's a quote from Mike Tyson. "I try to catch them right on the tip of his nose because I try to punch the bone into his brain." So I'm sort of not a fan of boxing because there are people like Mike Tyson who want to do that same thing to you. And would that be good for your brain or bad for your brain? Bad for your brain. Here is actually a world champion boxer who you can see, and he won most of his fights, but you can see the damage in his brain. Somebody who had a car accident where you can see the damage to the right side of his brain that's pretty serious. A soldier who had a blast injury, clear decreases compared to healthy. So protect your brain. Do everything you can to protect your brain. Brain fact number 5. We're going to visit this one a lot throughout the course. When your brain works right, you work right. But when your brain is troubled, for whatever reason, you're more likely to have trouble in your life. Brain fact 6. Certain brain systems are involved in certain behaviors, and we are going to talk about them throughout the course. So example, the prefrontal cortex, the front third of your brain, largest in humans and any other animal by far. It's 30% of the human brain, only 11% of the chimpanzee brain. Focus, forethought, judgment, impulse control, organization, planning. Critical to your success. The temporal lobes underneath your temples and behind your eyes. So right here in the brain, they're involved with learning, memory, understanding, speech, also involved in temper control. Your parietal lobes at the top back part of the brain are involved with sensing the world. They're also involved with direction sense. The occipital lobes in the back are involved in vision, and your cerebellum at the back bottom part of your brain is involved in coordination, but also thought coordination, how quickly you can integrate new information, which is why doing coordination exercises helps make you smarter. When there are problems in brain systems, for whatever reason, a head injury, toxic exposure, whatever, it tends to cause specific problems. So if you have problems in the prefrontal cortex, you'll see me abbreviate that as PFC. You're going to have problems with focus and judgment and organization and planning and impulse control. And you know people, they're late all the time. Odds are they have lower activity in their prefrontal cortex. In their temporal lobes, they're going to have issues with learning and memory, maybe temper problems, sometimes even seizures. Their parietal lobes, top back part of the brain, they may get lost easily because they can't navigate things. Their occipital lobes, they may have visual processing problems, and in their cerebellum at the back bottom part of the brain, more likely to have coordination issues, and they'll get confused more easily than other people. Brain fact number 7, normal is a myth. I love this one. Most people don't know that 51% of the US population at some point in their life will have a mental health issue. Depression, anxiety, ADHD, an addiction, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, an eating disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. So 51% of the US population will have a psychiatric disorder at some point in their life. So it's actually more normal to have a problem than not to have a problem. So I tell people normal is really nothing more than a setting on a dryer or a city in Illinois. I actually got to give a lecture once in Normal, Illinois, and it was really fun. I went to the Normal grocery store. I was interviewed on the Normal radio station. Went to the Normal post office. and I finally got to meet normal women. Being from California, that wasn't a lot of my experience. And I found out the people from Normal had exactly the same problems that I had seen virtually everywhere else in the world. So many of us have issues over time. Think of Normal as a setting on a dryer or a city in Illinois. A lot of people have mental health issues, but when you have them, you think you're the only one or no one else knows your experience. And I'm here to tell you it's just not true. If you struggle with attention, focus, sadness, anxiety, worry, flexibility, stubbornness, or impulsivity, welcome to Normal. I used to have this thought when I was a young psychiatrist that if I would meet someone who is like really together, and I'm like, oh, I bet that person's normal, within about 3 weeks, and it seemed to always happen this way, they would call me and want an appointment and tell me about all the stress in their lives. So don't think you are too different. But you know, the really sad thing, it's actually 11 years from the time a child first has a mental health issue, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, eating problems. It's 11 years before they actually seek help. So don't let that be you. We're going to talk about mental health issues throughout this course. Ask for help if you need it. Brain fact number 8, my favorite fact. What gets me up in the morning and gets me to work every day is you can change your brain. And when you do, you change your life. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better, and I can prove it. So if you've not been very good to your brain, if you've had brain injuries, if you've just not eaten very well, if you've had chronic stress, by doing the right things, and we're going to teach you about that throughout Brain Thrive by 25, by doing the right things, you can physically make your brain work better and even grow new neurons. If you do the wrong things, you will hurt your brain and hurt your chances for success. So again, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better. We can prove it. I'm going to show it to you over and over again and talk to Dr. Payne about it and our panel of kids who you will meet. Coming up in future lessons, you're going to learn about the developing brain. Your brain is wildly developing. You want to know about that. We're going to talk about specific brain systems, what they do, what happens when things go wrong, and how to make them better. We're going to talk about what hurts the brain. We're going to talk specifically how to change your brain and change your life.